Okay. We now formally start. विद्या भारती उच्च शिक्षण संस्थान द्वारा आयोजित राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति 2020 से संबंधित इंटरव्यू सीरीज में आप सभी का स्वागत है. We are thankful to माननीय रघुनंदन जी for initiating dialogue and discussion on various aspects of NEP. Let me introduce today's speaker, Professor S.C. Sharma, Director, NAC. Professor Sharma is an educationist, researcher, and an administrator. His areas of specialization are fracture mechanics, material engineering, and nanotechnology. Formerly, he was Vice Chancellor of Chhattisgarh Swami Vivekanand Technical University, Bhilai. This interview will be moderated by Dr. Padmavati B.S. Ma'am. Currently, she is Director, Center for Educational and Social Studies, Bengaluru. Now I request Padmavati ma'am to introduce the subject. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Anish ji. And thanks for introducing Professor Sharma sir and myself. Sir, as Dr. Anish ji mentioned, Vidya Bharati Ucha Shikshan Sangathan has started its series of webinars, basically to help the stakeholders implement the National Education Policy 2020. So I presume this is, we have started this today, and this is the first interview, I suppose. So this NEP 2020 proposes for transformative regulatory reforms in higher education sector. The policy recommends setting up of Higher Education Commission of India, and under this there will be 4 verticals to oversee 4 distinct functions of higher education. That is regulation, accreditation, funding, and academic standard setting. The policy says that these verticals will be distinct, independent, and empowered bodies in their functions. Accreditation is considered the primary mechanism to ensure the transformative regulatory reforms envisaged in NEP 2020. And therefore, a meta-accrediting body called National Accreditation Council is proposed to be set up. With this, the accreditation of institutions will be primarily based on basic norms, public self-disclosure, good governance, and outcomes, and it will be carried out by an independent ecosystem of accrediting institutions. Graded accreditation will be established, which will specify phased benchmarks for all higher education institutions to achieve levels of quality, self-governance, and autonomy. And accreditation over the next 15 years will become a binary process. This is how the NEP 2020 is set across for accreditation. With this backdrop, I have a few series of questions. And sir, on a lighter side, many people say that now it is National Assessment and Accreditation Council, and with NEP, 1A will be removed and it becomes NAC. But as a head of the Assessment and Accreditation Council of India, which is an apex assessment body, you must be having a different vision and different strategy to implement NEP 2020. So with this, our first question is, what will be the role of NAC as the policy starts unfolding? I'm talking about what will be the role of NAAC as the policy starts unfolding. How do you visualize the current NAC being transformed itself into a future National Accreditation Council?
Well, first of all, let me thank Dr. Professor Anish ji and also your good self, Dr. Padmavati madam. The answer to your question is, you have rightly said that 1A is scooped off. That is, NAC to become NAC, it would be a meta accreditation body. This is scenario 1. Scenario 2, I'll just tell you. But if it becomes NAC, then framing of rules and regulations for assessment and accreditation by accreditation institutions, that is AIs, is very important. And uniform guidelines for assessment and accreditation of the higher education institutions based on public disclosure. See, the concept of public disclosure is very important here. Hitherto, what we were doing is you have your IIQA and then self-study report and then your student satisfaction survey. It's a chain from IIQA to result declaration. But this is something like the income tax, for example, we have a self-declaration for income tax. This public disclosure is a very, very important concept here. But this is associated with some integrity and honesty. Because in the document, the central theme of the document is you believe people. Don't start with an assumption that I disbelieve. No, you believe people. You empower. It says the word as light but tight. It's a wonderful concept. So in this public disclosure, all the institutions will be allowed to have a public disclosure. But here, the uniformity or the rules or the questions or the metrics or the key indicators, these things have to be very well defined. And maintenance of data center for storing information of public disclosure is another challenge, because the entire country's data, when it is stored on the public disclosure, we should also have a data center wherein the corroboration at a later stage with what data the institution has submitted, and after 5 years or 6 years, what is the data that they have now at the present instant being submitted. These things have to be compared in the larger perspective, in the larger design of higher education institutions. And here again, a caveat is there. What is that caveat? To upload the documents in public disclosure, the window will be open for only 2 to 3 months per year. You know, it cannot be a continuous process. You can't update now, you can't change. And it creates a lot of entropy. Entropy is chaotic system. This chaos, if it is done, the whole process of exercise of accreditation will falter somewhere. Therefore, the element of bringing in an integrity and honesty there in the public disclosure, you give a time for 2 to 3 months so that the higher education institutions will be knowing what is it that they have to submit. Before that, when you go on a reverse engineering, you'll have to codify the metrics, they codify the pattern, what has to be submitted. So also, in case the institutions have forgotten to submit, you know, you don't close the door. You give them some kind of a window with proper evidence, they can upload. Here, the question of being a master and a regulator, this is completely not there. You are going to handhold the higher education institution. Ultimately, the quality of higher education institution in the country should come up. That is the only mandate, because at some stage, when we are very comfortable, it is a binary form of accreditation, whether you're accredited or not accredited. This is a wonderful concept in national education policy.
Thank you so much. You have also answered so many other challenges that higher education institutions are going to face. And there will be a massive use of technology, which will also ensure fastening the process as well as bringing in transparency. And you well said it, it's going to be mentored. It's not a sort of imposing from above. Sir, our next question is, under NEP, all the higher education institutions are going to introduce multidisciplinary programs. As of now, we have the science, commerce, and arts, which are, there's a watertight compartmentalization of disciplines. But under NEP, multidisciplinary programs will be introduced. According to you, what are the expected challenges of accrediting these multidisciplinary programs? And how is your institution going to address these challenges, sir?
Well, this is a question which needs a concentrated effort and pointed answer. In fact, questions, metrics focusing more on multidisciplinary courses and research offered by the institutions to be framed. What has happened now is Music University. It has its own manual. Music does not have. I'm just giving an example. Sanskrit University has its own manual. Medical University has its own manual. And general universities, as you know, there are manuals. Would be framed on number of multidisciplinary collaborative projects between teachers, departments, and institutions. And programs providing interdisciplinary knowledge have to be captured properly. And undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctoral students involved in multidisciplinary research in the institutions have to be borne in mind. Multiple guides with field and subject specific expertise allotment to PhD researchers. This is very important, which cuts across. For example, an engineering student wants to take up a problem in physics or chemistry or even biology. Most of the universities, I don't know whether this is permitted or not, but it should be permitted. At least in higher IITs or IISc, this is done. For example, if you take up nanotechnology, even in physics or in chemistry or in biotechnology or biological sciences, it cuts across. So also a student of history, if he has to do something connected with archaeology, for example, monument studies, etc., he should take a person from architecture or engineering stream, because the construction, the materials that were being used, and the domes that were being constructed, what are the lighting arrangements way back thousands of years in temples, etc. The history aspect is you're going to see the genesis, and you see the postulations of various thoughts of historians. But if you amalgamate, if you have a homogeneity with science, technology, and history, this is wonderful, I feel. Therefore, multiple guides with field and subject specific expertise allotment to PhD student is essential. Likewise, Sanskrit languages. You see, Sanskrit is such a great language and a heritage language throughout the world, particularly India. It can very well fit into computer science and engineering. If this course or the alphabets are zigzag or whatever it is on the palm leaf, etc., you bring on in a very methodical fashion by adopting the computer science and engineering technique called as Zarinsky's method. So, literature, a Sanskrit scholar and a computer science and engineering scholar, both of them together can have a good visibility and bring out excellent research out. This is not restricted only to Sanskrit. For all languages, it is the same. So I personally feel you cannot have a difference between yoga and kshema. In Vishnu Sahasranama, it says, yoga kshemam vahamyam. If there is no kshema, there is no yoga. If there is no yoga, there is no kshema. When you put sugar into the milk and miscible, you cannot see the sugar you can only taste. Therefore, you can taste the miscibility, homogeneity. And then coming back to the main point, research topics are designed to students keeping nearby community development, for example, social work. I cannot simply postulate theories and keep it in the shelf for the next person to get another PhD. It should not be n plus 1, n plus 2, n plus 3. There should be something connected with community development. What is this community development? Recently, the government's mandate is Atmanirbhar Bharat. How do you relate that to NEP, National Education Policy? For example, a student of MSW or student of a PhD student, MSW, social work. If there is in a village, he should know whether the agriculture produce requires a machine. If a machine has to be developed, you take the help of production engineer. So social work and technology combination. So thereby, you know, if you have a mechanized form with, just like in an industry, an artificial intelligence to take over the manpower, but it doesn't mean that you're reducing the manpower. You're empowering the man by training to get into skills. So that is what is called as Atmanirbhar Bharat. And even in NEP, when you see discreetly, it says that we should be hands-on. So wherein the whole community development takes place. And then project results addressing the society problems. If my research does not address the society problems, I need not get into research at all, because in the document it very clearly says what is the bachelor's scope and what is vocational scope and what is the doctoral scope, etc. Now there are umpteen number of challenges. Out of memory, whatever I get, I'm just telling you. You see, fragmented higher education ecosystem. What a negative system it is now. You see, you have your technical university aloof. You have your general university aloof. You have agriculture university aloof. You have your medical sciences university aloof. But where is the ecosystem? Is there joy there for a student? If I have to get into some kind of a dissection in medical sciences and take up a research for a pure science or physical sciences, I have a limited access to it, because a medical university is separate, a general university is separate. The ecosystem has to change. All right. After independence, 10 years you discount, because you know you'll have to have a kind of a pattern of higher education. But the same pattern pre-independence took off. But what a great document was Kothari Commission's report. It was teacher-centric, it was based on value-based, even for that matter, Sir S. Radhakrishnan's report in 1947. And he says intellectual adventure. Intellectual adventure is such a great connotation. But what happened? We did not have the will. The respective authorities should have taken. They only took, pick and choose. Whatever was relevant, they took. That which was uncomfortable to the system, they conveniently left. Why I am just telling you is, it is such a painful thing. The government has spent after independence a lot of money from Department of Science and Technology for research and UGC or HRV. So many, let me not name, so many organizations. But why a home ground person could not get a Nobel Prize? It's a big question mark. The answer to this is, you know, why I'm narrating this is because the concept of National Science National Research Foundation is excellent, whereas National Science Foundation in Washington DC just give money only for science and technology. But here, National Research Foundation, it takes a holistic approach of liberal arts, science, technology, and other fields, allied fields also. But here, coming back to the point, why the country did not achieve as it should have done after independence is because If I get fund in superconductivity, well, I grab that fund, I write a proposal. And after that, if I want, if the order of the day in the world is fracture mechanics, I jump from superconductivity to fracture mechanics. Then if it is material science, I get a project in material science. If it is automation, I get there, and then nanotech. So I hop from one place to the other. There is no concentrated effort. So that is the reason, probably the ecosystem, the education ecosystem, there is somewhere we have gone wrong in the past, and we have been correcting it also. And national education policy is a great answer for this. That too, particularly National Research Foundation. The role is very good. And there is less emphasis on development of cognitive skills and learning outcomes for the students. So these are the challenges. How do you overcome this? Overcoming is, even in small institutions, rural places, etc., this cognitive skill is nothing wonderful or rocket science. They have the computer lab. Even an arts, a liberal art or master of arts student also has a center, but there the learning outcomes have to be devised so that the student can have a very good access to the software of the learning outcomes, and he can develop the cognitive skills. And then there is a rigid separation of discipline with early specializations and streaming of students into narrow areas of studies. For example, as I just mentioned, an art student, if he's really interested in science, he doesn't want to, he has no option at all. A student, an art student, if he says that H2O is water, water is flowing, how does it flow? You know, you need the science there. Q is the discharge, is equal to area into velocity. In a pipe, if it flows, what is the area and what is the velocity? These are some of the fundamental things which a person can understand. But no, the answer is no. It is like a Jatka horse with blinkers. I go with the blinkers. I cannot see this side or that side. This is another thing which has pulled back the education system. You see, and we have limited access, particularly to the socio-economically disadvantaged areas with few higher education institutions also that have been taught in the local languages. See, this is the document is a wonderful document, especially what appealed me as an educationalist is the socio-economic disadvantaged group. On one hand, we talk about social justice. After 1947, a lot of they established the social welfare empowerment department and social welfare department. Is all done by giving scholarships? Is that the solution? No. The socio-economic disadvantaged areas, you'll have to find the proper methodology to get into the roots. Therefore, how do we do that? We do that by community development. The document is very well written, as you have universities at every district. And then the document also says that in the socio-economic disadvantaged area, you have special zones there. What are the special zones? You take the statistics, what was early and what is now. And the socio-economic disadvantaged areas, slowly the graphs should come to the normal. Now, if it is straight line, it should come to the normal on the axis. That we should say that there is a remarkable improvement in the country. The volume of the socio-economic disadvantaged people and the areas have to be taken, keeping the principles of constitution.
Sir, you have, sorry, sir. Sir, you have very well put across how an institution can offer the multidisciplinary program. And especially I am impressed by the example that you gave, like history students are already boxed. But with your approach to multidisciplinary program, I'm sure history students will partner with science students, and similarly with commerce students and with the physics professor. So you have put very well. And this will also be a sort of a pathway to the higher education institution to transit towards a multidisciplinary program. And probably NAC is already working towards how this multidisciplinary program can be assessed and accredited. Sir, my next question is, under the NEP, higher education institution will be classified into type 1, that's research intensive universities, type 2, that is teaching intensive universities, and there will be a lot of autonomous degree granting institutions. So what are the expected challenges of accreditation in view of these classification of higher education institution? And how is your institution going to tackle all these challenges, sir?
Madam, now let me get into the two areas first and then the accreditation, AC, granting accreditation, autonomous colleges. One is the research intensive. Research intensive, you will have to naturally research and teaching intensive. You'll have to have the ratio proportion. That is, all teachers or all professors cannot be excellent researchers. All excellent researchers cannot be excellent teachers. So it is categorically, it is defined as teaching intensive and research intensive, as all of us know. But here, to capture the data, we'll have to have an assessment methodology, the weightages and metrics. Now, whatever metrics, whatever weightages, whatever the key indicators are there, this has to be carefully captured with respect to teaching intensive, 1A. And then research intensive, B, universities need to be worked out. And currently we have criteria addressing research and innovation done in the institution. We'll have to back work and also postulate what kind of methodology has to be adopted and what kind of metrics has to be adopted to capture the whole gamut of teaching and research institutions. This can be done very well by taking the past data. As we know, Monte Carlo simulation in statistical simulations, you take the data and you find out in which area what metrics have to be adopted in the framework. However, we need to include and orient out criteria addressing multidisciplinary courses and research also. Maybe we can imagine that in a research institute, they would like to have 50% teaching, or in a teaching institute, research also. So we'll have to, this is the third category. In this third category, the metric should capture both teaching and research also. With regard to the question which you asked about autonomous colleges, the graded autonomy, and how do we assess the college, and what are the pattern of assessment, that is by teaching, learning, research, social work, extension activities. These are some of the things which we have to frame and give some kind of a training for the colleges also. Eventually it becomes a degree granting institutions. Therefore, the accreditation pattern has to be more objective, analytical, and pointed. I'm using the word pointed because it should only say that either accredited or non-accredited. But even to say accredited, we'll have to bring the standards higher up. I'm just talking about the last student in the country also should be benefited by accreditation. How is it going to be benefited? By having good teachers, by having small principles of laboratory experiments, and by having hands-on. These are the three important things which we have to do.
So very well said, sir. In fact, the quality that we are talking about is to benefit each and every student, whether the student sits in the first bench or in the last bench. It has to be given to each and every student. Sir, our next question is, NEP considers high quality research among higher education institutions as key to establish India as a global knowledge leader. But given the fact that a lot of substandard publishing houses are mushrooming in our country and our publishing has become a sort of a business, How would an accrediting body like yours ensure research quality among higher education institutions? You have already thrown some lights on this one. If you can give us in a nutshell, a few direction to higher education institution in this respect, that would help us a lot, sir.
Madam, here, what happens is, why do we publish papers? This is a fundamental question. Why should I possess a PhD is another fundamental question. You see, in a university, it says that you'll have to have a PhD to become an assistant professor. You'll have to have some kind of a scores to become an associate professor, ascent also. No. As Vice Chancellor of Tumkur University, it's a district university. Sorry, can I explain my personal experience?
Of course, sir, please.
Yeah. We said we don't want a PhD at assistant professor's level. We want NET, National Entrance Test, or SLET. And then obviously we got a lot of PhDs from Singapore, National University, or Japan, whoever went there on a postdoc work, who had already taken NET and SLET, they came and they joined. At associate professor level, our hands were tied because it stated that you'll have to have a PhD and API scores, annual performance index scores, performance index. There it says that you'll have to have this many papers, this many projects. It is quite frustrating because when you tie my hands, I always tend to come out and be so. The publications in all kinds of XY journals started, but the country is largely benefited by Dr. Bhushan Patwardhanji, Vice Chairman, University Grants Commission. And he has written wonderful article also. Recently I read in, I think, I don't remember, in AIU or some policy and economic journal. He has categorically devised what is predatory and what is not predatory. And this kind of a menace of paying money to the journals and getting it just increases the weight of my biodata. Please note my sentence, weight of my biodata. When you keep on the pan balance, the weight is there is no kind of a weightage in academics. Therefore the role, what is the solution? I've only been telling the problems. The solution is journals recognized by National Research Foundation has a lot of responsibility, and it should recognize by national funding agencies need to be entertained. That is Elsevier, what is it? Web of Science, what is it? Scopus Index, what it is. So it should set up benchmarks very nicely, and the role of National Research Foundation, I think the country's research is directly proportional to the National Research Foundation's policies and principles, which is going to come up. I'm sure, I think we should start working towards the norms of National Research Foundation. And the second thing is for funding projects as well as for mandatory requirement for awarding PhD, promotion and award of higher degree recognitions to be considered. This has to be done. This is very important. And then funding to be as per the rating of the journey and accumulation of research publications in the institutions. It is not only a single institution. What happens is, if I go on publishing, my biodata increases, but I should see the holistic approach. It should be infectious in the college. It should be infectious in the institution, like the publications in the institutions, teachers, departments in the institutions have to be educated, and the scope of investigation in research should be encouraged. So to put it in a nutshell, the role of National Research Foundation is very important. Number two, predatory journals have already been classified in Web of Science, Scopus, etc. We know the whole thing, and this has to be taken. And you know there is another thing going on across the universities. We present papers in the conferences, and the abstracts are taken in the, what is it, in the book form. And we claim that as paper with full length. No, it is not a paper, not at all. So these things have to be addressed carefully.
Yes, sir. So NRF will have a very critical responsibility
Yes.
in ensuring the research ecosystem in the country. And you said it very well, sir. The research is not by one particular faculty member. It has to be by the faculties of the entire institution. So one person cannot be driving the entire research of the country or the institution. Sir, our next question is, this NEP 2020 says that accreditation of institution will be primarily based on basic norms, public self-disclosure, good governance, and outcomes. Based on this, how would you simplify accreditation of higher education institution in a way that motivates institutions to enhance their quality of education instead of considering this is something being imposed upon them and being intimidated?
Well, this is a nice word, intimidation, correct. You see, if you link, well, you get 3.26, you will get your, what is it, madam? Your open.
GPA, sir?
Yeah, no, score in A plus or A plus plus. You A grade or A plus, you get your open distance learning. If you get A, you get your RUSA. You see, it should not be like you put $5 and you get a Coke out in a vending machine, because this is the document very clearly says that, again I'm repeating, joy and opportunity. If there is no joy in getting the accreditation done, I should not only get into the opportunity side of it. Therefore, I think slowly the whole concept should be erased. This kind of a menace should be eradicated, erased and eradicated. I get A plus plus, you get A, you get B plus plus, I get C. It is binary, either accredited or not accredited. And then, this is my personal view, regulatory authority and accreditation authority should not go hand in hand. No, judiciary and executive, they don't mix together, isn't it? So this is this somehow or the other, I'm not comfortable, at least as an educationalist. But of course, it is addressed in the national education policy, where institutions will be accredited. The answer to your question is based on public disclosure. I think I have already mentioned about it. Once all the higher education institutions disclose, then it is up to the accreditation agency to pick up and say that, well, these are the documents which are insufficient. These are the documents which you have to be updated. It should be an education for the higher education institution. You should handhold the higher education institutions. So this is one thing. The second thing is HEIs will have to get accredited the date when we will be taken by the public disclosure. And the peer team members visiting the institutions will be validating the data submitted by education. A third party can always evaluate the public disclosure document. Now, whether to have a peer team or not is a debatable question. Because if everything is there on the website, if I'm very honest, I don't think a peer team visit should visit there. And there should be a flexibility. Yes, light is this, but what about tight? You cannot go on having IPC code, Indian Penal Code, Criminal Procedure Code. I should not doubt a person's integrity unnecessarily unless and until I find that there is some gross problem there. So this kind of a Atma, with great confidence that I should not cheat. When will that happen? If you have too much of law, I tend to break the law. Therefore, let me start with an assumption. All higher education institutions, when we give some kind of a leverage for them to have a public disclosure, they are telling the truth. When they don't tell the truth, when they transgress the law will take course of its action, that is tight, light but tight.
Thank you, sir. Very well said. Now, integrity is going to be the
Very,
core pillar for the
yes,
quality of education. Yes, we do trust as a regulatory authorities. We are going to trust each and every higher education institution that they are aligning with the set standards. Sir, on the similar lines.
sorry for the interruption.
Yes, sir.
You see, you said integrity. You see, for example, I was quite dismayed by the way the teacher education was being conducted in all the universities. And it was not at all comfortable. They would cheat, they would prepare the reports. Same thing in engineering, the final year project students, engineering reports were being done by outsourced. But this has been very clearly addressed in the National Education Policy document that teacher education is for 4 years.
Yes, sir.
So the fundamentally, if a teacher gets into the same teacher gets into the school, and what kind of a product you get out in the colleges. So this has been very nicely addressed in the document, articulated very well in the document. That is one thing.
Yes, sir. Sir, on the similar lines, what will be the role of NAC in continuous improvement of higher education institution and in building and sustaining an ecosystem that would ensure translating the vision of NEP 2020? Sir, as of now in the current system, what is happening is we do the assessment and accreditation, and after a stipulated period of time, we revisit the institution for the same process. But has there been any sustained effort to ensure that quality becomes a trend, quality becomes a culture among the higher education institution? What is your say on this, sir? And what will be your role in continuous improvement of
Madam,
the
you
education
said
system?
quality becomes a trend. Quality becomes a culture. Trend is by letter of law. Culture is by spirit of law. Again, the concept of integrity comes into this thing. Why the concept of integrity is there is no submission of self-study report, because you have already disclosed voluntary, what is it, public disclosure, voluntary disclosure. Mapping of documents and data submitted in the public disclosure into defined manual for assessment of a public type of institution or a particular type of institution is important, which means to say the data that has been given on the public disclosure and the data which you have, does it corroborate well, or will the institution voluntarily give good data, sincere data, or mask the data? See, when you have binary accreditation, the fundamental basic things will be fulfilled. Therefore, they will, my opinion is at least 70% will not cheat. When does cheating business start? I'm sorry to use this terminology, cheating business or manipulation or whatever word you call. When I say that, I will have a link. If I get A grade 3.01, I get autonomous. If I get autonomous, I can admit my own, have my own board of studies. If I get a private university, suppose computer science and engineering is the demand, well, put down civil engineering or close down printing technology, increase to 400 seats and have your own left, right, center fees and donation. But in the document, it clearly says curbing commercialization. So also, it's how beautifully the document is like a Bhagavad Gita, how beautifully it is drafted. You see, it says liberal art. If I have to do something connected with music or music technology, I get into a science stream. So therefore, he says, do not have fragmentation of education. Indirectly, the curbing has to come down. So it is beautiful. For example, Steinhardt, New York, Carnegie Mellon, or Indiana, Purdue University, music technology fellow can get into electronics, signal processing. From signal processing, he comes back to the liberal art. Not that we have to compare UK or USA. In our 64 Vidyas of our ancient tradition, we had all these things and how to go from one place to the other. We had everything. Slowly, the kind of a cataract happened, the whole thing. Now the cataract has to be removed to have a good ecosystem, Indian ecosystem, and bring up. The answer to your question for continuous improvement is the voluntary disclosure, number one. Number two, to corroborate the data. And number three, if there is any faulty data there, automatically the institution will perish.
Sir, you already gave some insight into Indian ethos. On the similar line, I have one more question. This national education policy envisions an education system rooted in Indian ethos that contributes directly to transforming India. This calls for inclusion of Indian knowledge system by higher education institutions. In this context, what would be the criterion for accrediting institutions? How this renewed emphasis on Indian knowledge system should be laid, sir?
Madam, there will be a separate criterion for just like teaching learning process or research or extension activities. So there will be a separate criterion on Indian knowledge system where it will be framed the promotion of Indian culture and Vedic technology, and then Indian art, indigenous skills, traditional aspects, synchronization of the institutional knowledge with the topographical and social background of the areas and districts. This is very important. The reason is, for example, being a student of mechanical engineering, I'll just give you an example. Vedic technology was just mentioned. For example, if you have a gear train, if it is an external meshing of gear train, one rotates like this clockwise, the other rotates anti-clockwise like this. So you get T2 divided by T1, the efficiency is higher. But we adopt that. Why not relate to our ancient theory? For example, in Vatapi Ganapatim Bhaja, there is a Mooladhara Kshetra Sthitam Paradi Chatvari Vagatmakam. Mooladhara, Manipur, etc. One circle on other circle on other. Therefore, the gear train concept was given here. Similarly, when one complete is removed from the other, thermodynamics law, Purnamada. Like this, they and in the time and space. In one of the theories, it's a Desha Kala Pravardhini Mahadeva Manolasi. You can, from literature also, you can find out what is time and what is space. Tripura Vimana, for example, the concept of Tripura Vimana of Ravana, that has come into reality now. So this kind of a thing should be subtly, not directly. You cannot embed in the syllabus. You will have to mount the syllabus in such a way the student will have the curiosity to know the Indian culture. What is it? What is the Vedic technology and what is the Indian art and indigenous skills? Yes, I agree. Automation is very important. Artificial intelligence is important where somewhere in Carnegie Mellon or in Harvard or in Stanford or wherever. But you'll have to see to the area and local need. If the population are there who are doing some welding work there, train them for a better welding and let them improve the technology there instead of bringing the total automation there. Total automation is essential where the profit volume chart in a fixed cost and optimum cost is important. But in a rural place or in a district with a social background, have a native technology, native art there. This is my concept of knowledge system.
Very well said, sir. I'm very sure this will also encourage our higher education institutions to adopt regional Indian knowledge systems so that students will also be benefited and the community as well will get the benefits. And institution will be accredited or they'll have more credits based on how they are offering
criterion
Indian
altogether.
systems. Yes. So my last question is, quality is actually a relative term. Even as a student of political science and working in the sector of higher education, try to understand what exactly is a quality in the higher education system or quality as such. There's a lot of diverse definition, but however, there is a strong consensus on the attributes of quality. For example, high impact research publications or empowered students or some of the attributes of quality education. So keeping in mind the current status of Indian education and the aspirations as set out in the NEP, how would you define quality? Either something called Indian quality, or are we going to set out something like that? At the same time, we are also aspiring to be on the top 10 of global ranking. So how do you, what is your views on this? What is your perspective on this?
Madam, as you rightly said, it is a relative term. You see, global perspective, quality is uniform right throughout, whether it is South Africa, China, or United States or UK. But mathematically, quality Q cannot be inversely proportional to integrity. Quality should be a direct proportional, it should be directly proportional to integrity. When does the quality come? You said relative term. Yes, it is a relative term. If I am having a proper courage of conviction, then automatically the quality will fall. If the principal is a non-corrupt, he just follows the truth, automatically the quality will improve in the college. If you have the will, dhi shakti in Sanskrit, you will definitely improve the quality of higher education institution. If that integrity is missing, gone. The whole, I can summarize in one sentence, the whole national education policy document as envisioned by me individually, it says integrity. The word integrity, everywhere it resounds at several places. Once you have integrity, you have quality. Well, this is, I would, if you call this as a theoretical aspect, the practical aspect is to attain and achieve quality, teaching learning. A teacher's role is important, teaching learning. The relevant board of studies, they should be very, very conscious and careful. I'm using the word conscious and careful because while framing the syllabus, it cannot be a run of the mill. Number 3, don't force a person to get into research, to get into publication, to fend for his lab a research grant from the place. If I do it, what I'll be doing, I'll be incurring a mediocrity level of teacher, level of it. Again, I'm repeating the word joy and opportunity of the NEP document. We should instill that kind of a joy here and create an opportunity with National Research Foundation. When I see the whole gamut of all the four verticals and HECI, I give topmost importance to the National Research Foundation because it has a great responsibility of formulating a roadmap on one side. On the other side, have a PERT chart. You know, you have variegated, heterogeneous institutions, but you will have to have a 360 degrees concept of what kind of a research. If you have research, you will have teaching altogether, another platform. The whole country will improve, I'm sure, with this document. The answer to your question in one answer is quality is directly proportional to integrity. If integrity is there, automatically the institution's whole concept of teaching and with an affectionate word, with great love and affection, you can always mold a student to become a good citizen of this great country. This is mine.
Sir, thank you so much. In fact, this is what we, the stakeholders of education, is foreseeing to happen under NEP. Yes, integrity is the central for the entire success of the policy as well as the sustained quality delivery of the higher education institution. And you have very well said it, sir. No faculty should be forced or imposed into get into a research if he or she has no capability of doing so. That's where the corruption breeds in. That's where the integrity is compromised. So, sir, you have given a sort of a pathways to all higher education institution in how they can develop themselves to adopt, to transit to the NEP 2020 aspirations. Sir, on behalf of Vidya Bharati, I thank you so much for sparing your time as well as sharing your very, very provocative thoughts. And I'm very sure the higher education institutions as well as other stakeholders will heavily benefit from your views and perspectives, sir. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you. Namaste. Thank you.
Namaste, sir. Doctor, it's over to you now.
Thank
Dr.
you so much,
Anish Ji,
sir.
it's over to you now.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you, ma'am, for this nice interview and very informative interview. So I think we should end this interview now, because in recording only this part will come. What you ended. और बहुत अच्छा रहा.
Dr. Anish Ji, I think you must have also briefed sir about our next course of action, no?
In this interview series, we are going to conduct interviews of a lot of head of institutions, sir. And in the second stage, we will start interviews of vice chancellors. And in third stage, we will start interviews of parents. What is their take about new education policy? And later we will document it, and we will try to publish some of the interviews in some leading newspaper. But before doing that, we will send you the transcript of that interview, or you can edit that and you can add something else. So this is our future plan regarding them.
Very nice, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you and good day to you, sir.
Namaskar. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar.